Hello. I guess this will be the first official episode of Namtaro Talks. And to be honest, the first subject at hand is not the sexiest one. It is the 2024 election. But the reason that I had this idea for this channel and decided to talk about this topic is because there was just a lot on my mind regarding it. There's only so much I can convey in words or in writing. And I just need a better medium to share it because it's just quite a bit and it would just take too long to write it all down myself. Like I said in the introduction video, I have no idea how long this would take and don't expect anything super professional. Also, I have no idea how many episodes I will make or what direction this will be, but hey, it's something. Well, without further ado, I'll just go straight into the topic at hand, the 2024 election. But to preface that, I recall the 2016 election. I was a grad student at the time, and I was at the library. Luckily, there was nothing to study for, or no tests coming up or anything. But I always spend time at the library to study regardless, to catch up on notes and keep up with the lectures. Anyways, that was the least of my concerns that election night in 2016 because we were refreshing. I think it was like 5:35, whatever, to check the elections, check for updates, and honestly, I was kind of frustrated and distraught because there was a certain result that I wanted, and I know many other people wanted, and I was just refreshing it, and my classmate was sitting next to me, and he was not happy too, but of course he was kind of laughing at the situation, and after not getting much studying done at the library, I went home and I tried to sleep and tried to wonder what the next 4 years at that moment were going to be. And my housemate and I, we couldn't sleep. We stayed up till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And to be honest, I am writing this, well, I am doing this quote unquote podcast from partially a script because that's where I write my ideas down, but I don't necessarily, I guess, read things word for word. But that's the way my nature. I've always wrote stuff down to keep track of it later. Well, anyways, back on topic. Yeah, I won't get into too much detail about how the years between 2016 and 2020 were for the country because we kind of already knew, and we're not talking about 2020 to 2024 right now. I'm talking about the 2024 election. Yeah, so I know who I voted for. As a matter of fact, I'm very sure most of America made up their mind regarding it already. I mailed in my ballot 3 weeks ahead because I live in an area where they still allow for mail-in ballots, and I trust their election process. And the day of the election, I purposely tried my best to avoid the news, avoid social media, avoid anything that could, quote unquote, spoil it for me. But at around 9 or 9:30, I was like, okay, enough's enough. Time to bite the bullet and find out. And when I saw the results, honestly, I was not very shocked. I was very disappointed, of course. But like I told my wife and my cousins, I was numb. That's the best word to describe what I was going through emotionally at the time because I wasn't sure how to feel. Because pretty much, to be told, many emotions were going through me. But I can definitely tell you those emotions were not joy, happiness, or hope. I told my wife that there would be many implications and repercussions from this election because it will set a precedent for the American psyche and way of life, not just for the next 4 years, but for generations to come. I told her that our current standard of living, we are fortunate to be where we are in life in what I call a manageable position, especially with our living situation, finances, community, and careers. However, the nature of our jobs allow us to interact with those who are not as fortunate as we are because we work with people with much more hardships regarding their health, their homes, and their living situations. We also have family and friends who are also undergoing similar challenges. Like I say, this topic and this quote unquote podcast will jump around a little bit. I said I won't get into 2016 to 2020 as much, but the several things I noticed during that course was I thought how unstable it was, how the administration took the wrong positions on everything regarding rights of certain groups of people, healthcare, foreign policy, disaster relief in Puerto Rico, and I think that I forgot. I think it was a storm or hurricane or something like that. In California, I remember those giant fires for sure, especially how that administration handled COVID-19 and also culminating with January 6th. I breathed a sigh of relief once there was a change in administration in 2020. And of course, that administration had their own share of challenges, such as like I don't know what I call spoiled Congress who wouldn't approve of certain bills or budgets and having to make many concessions and compromises. Not to mention the situation with withdrawing from Afghanistan was not the prettiest, to say the least. It was a long time coming. It needed to be done, but it needed to be done better and more organized and without the current repercussions, And not to mention, nothing against, okay, we'll be honest, migrants are coming across the border more easily than before, and there is economic inflation. The prices of many items are rising. Of course, housing prices are rising, but not as compared to like wages and salaries, Long story short, I felt like despite that administration's best efforts, America as a whole became meaner and more anxious. I admit I have been procrastinating with making this talk, but what better time to do it before the eve of the inauguration of the upcoming administration? And truth be told, it will likely be more of the previous, what happened between 2016 and 2020, and maybe even worse, because right now they have control of both houses. They have the Supreme Court favoring their agenda, and the Supreme Court's corrupt in their own right. Not to mention, they've learned from their mistakes. They put in yes men. They got Project 2025 now. Pretty much they're like a supercharged Super Saiyan version of before, and they will pretty much exploit every loophole, every opening to their interests, whether it's the religious fundamentalists, the extremists, pretty much the worst of society, not to mention, I guess, the billionaire class and the corporate elites and whatnot, with all three houses, or all three branches of government under control. There's likely no checks and balances. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court might be full conservative Republican to the farthest right, to the extreme for generations to come. I don't know how feasible it is, but it's on the table, they could get rid of term limits of certain office positions, or even Supreme Court justices, or even the president. They can make him the leader forever if they wanted, though that's not likely to happen because he's very old, and I'm very sure he has health problems and will pass sooner than later. They can stack the courts. They can screw over the census. They will continue to gerrymander the district lines. Meanwhile, the rest of us have no choice but to sit on the sidelines and watch it all happen, and helpless, and can't barely do anything about it, really, Of course, it's part of their agenda to deport the illegal immigrants. And honestly, immigration is a very complex subject, because you want people to come in legally. You want people to come in to contribute to the country, who have the country's best interest in mind, and who try to pursue the quote-unquote American dream, if it still exists anymore. And you also have the bad actors who come in to cause trouble, to pretty much get away with what they couldn't get away in their home country, or to exploit the American system and just try to sponsor and sneak other people in. However, that isn't the entire case. Not everyone is like that. But the system itself needs to have a better means of vetting the good actors, the honest people, from the bad actors, but in a way that's more humane. It's not one or the other. There shouldn't be an anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner, anti-other agenda, because they say, oh, diversity is good and that, but honestly, that diversity, it provides at least a different perspective, but in a way that the people coming into the country, they have to find where they fit into America also, try to imprint their identity, but not impose their will. So it's like a compromise. That's the situation of immigration, really. You can't be super inhumane and just kick everyone out and separate families. And there was even talk of deporting legal immigrants. I don't even know how that's possible. Like legal immigrants who are in the country for decades or generations and who contribute to society and the economy and advance the image of America. You want to deport them too? Not to mention the situation in Israel and Ukraine. Of course, the situation with Russia, it's a bit dicey right now. So I guess from a foreign policy perspective, we had to keep Russia in check. And Russia couldn't just, at this day and age, you can't just be invading countries anymore. But the new incoming administration, they're pro-Russia for some reason. They feel like emboldened to do whatever they want, and at the expense of the Ukrainian people. Like these are honest people who they're just living their own lives. Honestly, the whole situation, it shouldn't have happened to begin with. Or like, why can't they just leave each other alone? And I know that there's been a long historical things going on between Ukraine and Russia, and it's not that simple. And we can't just keep sending aid to Ukraine whenever they want and whenever they ask for it. But we can't just cut them off cold turkey either. And I know it puts the United States in a difficult situation, but honestly, it's like you're stuck in a rock and a hard place, and then you got yourself into that position to begin with. We couldn't just sit back and let Ukraine fend on their own, but now we're stuck helping them. What are we gonna do? Like, just cut off the aid cold turkey easily? It's not that simple. It's, if they're supposedly an ally, how would that look to the rest of the world? And the situation in Israel, okay, I admit I am not some historical expert. I just try to go by quote unquote general knowledge, but I do my due diligence, keeping an eye out on the news, do a little research accordingly here and there, and fact check and check the sources of those information accordingly. And I know there's a lot of deep-seated history between Israel with the Middle East and Palestine and how they handled the West Bank and Gaza. But what started the whole thing on October 7th was like the Hamas. They attacked the Israeli music festival and kidnapped and killed a bunch of people. But Israel's retaliation, I mean, I don't know how justified it is. It might be way over the top. And Hamas, they're bad actors. They don't necessarily care for the Palestinian people. And it's been going on back and forth, but then people feel like they had to take a side. Like, oh, we're pro-Israel, no, we're pro-Palestine. But then someone even go as far as pro-Hamas. I'm like, what are you talking about? And only recently, there is a supposed ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, or Palestine, or Gaza, or West Bank. I don't know. It's all like a big jambalaya at this point. And I hope it works out. I hope it lasts. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a deeply bleeding wound that's been scarred over many times. Well, it's progress. It's something, but it's not one-sided, because Israelis have their reasons to feel that way about Palestinians and Hamas and vice versa. So it's not super black and white. There's some things, there's just so much gray area, and unless you do the due diligence to do all that research, like, you have no position to just straight up make a claim or take a side or take a moral stance, because situations are usually much more complicated than that. And I'm very sure the average person, they don't always have the times and the means to research it on their own. Maybe if you're some kind of specialist or professor who studies that specific topic, but I can tell you I didn't. I can tell you my peers didn't. Like, we just go through our everyday lives, And with certain actions becoming unraged or unhinged or unpredictable upon the world stage, it may decrease our prestige and respect. And Though America is supposedly a superpower, and we don't. Honestly, before I thought America relatively served as the relative moral standard to for global politics to for other countries to conduct themselves accordingly. Because if it's not America, like who else is it gonna be? I don't want to get into that. And like America is far from perfect, and it has made many mistakes on the global stage in the past. But what's the alternative? What other superpower are you gonna follow? Another thing that ticks me off about the foreseeable future is that there will be little to no reform for everything that needs it. Pretty much all industrial complexes like big pharma and also rampant deregulation, such as for the environment. You can see for the trains that have been derailing. Not to mention there will be monopolies in most fields, and many companies and rich individuals will be not be held accountable and feel free to screw over the consumer, because the previous Federal Trade Commission chair, she made a lot of reforms and put the consumers in mind and tried to rein in the monopolies and the industrial complexes. But now all that effort is pretty much gone to waste. Right now, Boeing, banks, ticketing companies, big agriculture, big food, Johnson and Johnson, Procter and Gamble, even entertainment companies like Disney and Warner Bros. Can just do whatever you want. And don't get me started about big tech such as Comcast, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple. They have a monopoly on all technology and communication and can pretty much control social media however they want. Not to mention they continue avoiding taxes and hiding money in offshore accounts. If I had to take a stance on the topic, I am not anti-abortion. I am not fully pro-choice. I'm saying there has to be a balance between both, and abortion has to be on the table. Because though the sense of personal responsibility comes into mind, and you just can't have abortions whenever you want, there are many situations when abortion is warranted, especially if it jeopardizes somebody's health or has socioeconomic impacts, or in situations of incest or rape. Like, abortion has to be an available option. If you cut off abortion cold turkey, then every single baby has to be carried out to term, like regardless of health, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of burden on society. Where's the sense in that? Not to mention, with the state of America right now, there is a continued mental health crisis. A majority of people are depressed or anxious, and especially men. I keep hearing about for men too, because they feel lost. They feel like they don't have a place. They feel purposeless. They feel like they don't want to work. And honestly, I admit it easily could have been me. I could have went down that path if I didn't have the means to, I don't know, get myself out of the hole and find the help I need, or have a good support system to begin with. Who knows where I would have been? But not many people have the luxury or the means or the willpower or the knowledge to at least be guided towards a better path, a better direction, a way out. So they resort to, I don't know, doom and hopelessness, and it's easy for them to fall down a rabbit hole and take extremist views and become radicalized. That might be. I'm not saying that's the sole reason for mass shootings, but it's likely contributing to that also. Of course, mass shootings are a gun issue, and we're not gonna give everyone guns whenever they want, but it's also a mental health situation too. Because why would someone feel compelled to do a mass shooting in the first place? It makes the average American feel like that they are pretty much getting screwed over, that the government and the corporations and the forces in power are just making their lives worse or don't care about them. But the corporate media and the narrative is trying to push it through that, oh, things are fine the way it is, or you're perfectly fine. It's not going to get much better than this. You should learn to accept it. You should see it in this way or that way. You should be grateful instead. And of course, those who don't fully agree with this Republican conservative point of view, they are slapped with labels such as, oh, you're a snowflake, you're a communist, or you're a socialist, you are woke, you are liberal. Of course, the meaning of the word liberal, it's been completely warped. I don't even know what a true liberal is anymore. And of course, current people who lean slightly left or Democrats, or they try to distance from the term liberal, while conservatives fully embrace the fact that they are conservatives. They are proud to wear that label. Back to the subject of immigrants and immigration. It's not a new concept. Like right now, it's quote unquote the Mexicans, but back then it was the Irish and the Italians and the Eastern Europeans and the Jews. Technically, the first people who came to the United States, they were immigrants. So it's always this otherism. Oh, these people, they're coming in. They're gonna do this. They're gonna change that. We don't want them here. They're gonna make things worse. Blah blah blah. Honestly, these people, they just want to mind their own business. They want to contribute. They want to help out. They want to make an impact, a meaningful impact. If it's most immigrants, they accept that it's their new home. If they would have stayed in their old home country and fixed it, they could have. But sometimes, like, those means are much more difficult or not possible at the current moment. It's definitely not, all right, open borders, everyone come in whenever you want. Bring all your friends, all your family, do whatever you want. But it's not, screw you, stay out. We don't want you here. You have no place in our country. It has to be a balance, you know? Okay, it's like, all right, you want to come? We have the means, we have the space, we have the room. We'll help you. But this is our system. This is how you have to get through it. This is how you have to integrate. These are the jobs you gotta get. This is the education you need. This is the means to learn English, whatnot. It has to be much more organized and compromising. Compromise like that. And with the state of America right now, it's a relative blame game. The left and the right blame each other. The urban and the rural blame each other. And the natives and the immigrants, well, I guess they kind of blame each other too. Though the blame should be more towards the corporate elites who have unlimited power and money with all the lobbying and all the influencing of elections and political contributions to various campaigns. Like when it comes to politics and government, it is a serious matter. It is not like a sport, you know, and it's not entertainment either. Like I don't find pleasure when someone tweets something ridiculous. There are issues at hand. There's every life issues. There's regarding jobs, regarding healthcare, regarding education, regarding consumer rights and whatnot. Because the middle class, the lower middle class, they were definitely the majority. So it's their right to advocate for a better standard of living. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the working class. It comes down to the opportunities that one has to make one's life better, to have a job that you believe in, that brings you meaning, to have the time for leisure, the time to spend with your family and friends and loved ones, to explore hobbies and interests that are outside of your job, to even travel the world and gain different perspectives outside of the United States as appropriate, because we can't just be living in our own bubble all the time. There's different worlds out there, different countries, different continents, different languages, different cultures, and you only get a small snippet in certain urban areas in America, but nothing beats the real thing. Nothing beats being there. Nothing can replace it. And just being exposed to those settings, it broadens your horizons, it broadens your perspectives. Like, oh, these people over here have a different way of thinking, and that's why they think this way, because that's how they were raised, or that's where they come from, or this is their history, and they would do the same for us. Not everyone's just isolated in their corner of the world and just like does their own things, talks the own same things they talk about, and think their own way, and just wonder about the other people over there, and are scared of them, or suspicious of them. And I've seen my share of, I guess, political commentators talk about how weak the Democratic campaign was for this past cycle. Like I say, this is definitely not a political commentary channel. However, I couldn't help but notice like Biden's faculties and how weak Kamala Harris was as a candidate and how unpopular she was. Honestly, this past election, it should have been in the bag if you focus on what was important to the average American, to the working class, to the people struggling to make ends meet, to the people who want to find a purpose in this world, in this country. Not just go with identity politics and like race wars, class wars, like this and that, left and right. And when it comes to the justice system, the Democrats should have been tough on crime to begin with. Honestly, that's not that hard of a position to take. It's obvious. Like if you do the crime, you gotta be punished accordingly. You broke the law, so you get punished accordingly based on the current laws that are in effect for the country. I know the justice system isn't perfect. There's many innocent people found guilty and many guilty people who actually committed the crimes who get off scot-free or given super light sentences. And of course, certain people have judges in their favor or better lawyers, or they can just, I don't know, buy the best legal help possible. They get away with a lot of crimes. They abuse and contort the justice system. It's not perfect, but there has to be a justice system. And there has to be reinforcement of reasonable laws, but there also has to be a means to create and enforce reasonable laws too. There shouldn't be defunding the police. Like, if something bad happens to you, like, what do you look for? You want the police to come and help, right? And of course, like, the police aren't perfect. They need they need to be kept accountable also, but the alternative is not just get rid of the police or get rid of ICE. Or, you know, eventually it should just come down to a social contract. We just be civil to each other. Don't hurt each other. Don't commit crimes. That would be the ideal world. But of course, that's not the case we live in. But at least have a system in place to, I guess, really go after the detractors, like quote unquote, lay down the law to let them know that it is not okay to do that kind of stuff. It is not okay to disrupt someone else's peace. And according to studies done and political commentators, a lot of Gen Z men gravitate more towards the current administration because I guess they needed a better path, and that current administration gave them something to believe in. You could decry them, oh, they're alt-right, or they're going down the manosphere. But if those are their role models, like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Andrew Tate, then you need a better way they need better role models, but you can't just decry them. You have to provide the better role models, the better path for them, the better perspective. It's not only a matter of holding on to them as voters, but also holding on to, I guess, a better, clearer, more optimistic perspective of America. Not just I'm gonna get mine, or a dog eat dog, or just get yours, Because if everyone in America or everyone in the world thought like that, then we're not gonna get anywhere. There's no way to progress as a society, I won't get into too many details of why I follow and kept an eye on two figures over the years. Those two figures were Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang. But Bernie Sanders, he's a bit old. Like, he means well, and he has stances that the average working class, middle class American may agree with. But honestly, he's like a much smaller voice, a much smaller minority now. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that he was given more of a platform to make those points across, and the average American can listen to those points and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that. Yeah, I do need that. I hope there's people who fight for those kinds of things I need in my everyday life. But no, he's just being drowned out. And Andrew Yang, some people found him to be quirky or random, or the guy who gives everyone $1,000 a month. But he was relatively sensible, at least. Isn't right now? I can't believe common sense is considered the standard for politicians and being in the government. He talks about ranked choice voting because right now it's a two-party system. It's like Democrat or Republican. But with ranked choice voting, you would have to cast a much wider net to appeal to as many Americans as possible, like the Democrats and the Republicans and everyone in between. Because right now, a lot of people are quote unquote politically homeless. They don't want to identify as Democrat or Republican. They call themselves independent. They might lean slightly this way on certain topics or the other way on other topics. But to put a label to, they don't want to be lumped in with those who are super crazy on the far left or far right. And if ranked choice voting provides a more representative, result of the will of the people, then it should be enacted. But of course, that's not going to happen because people want their parties and their candidates and their positions in power as opposed to the will of the people, the general public itself. Honestly, this past election and the foreseeable future, it makes me question the good in humanity because after these results, it emboldens all of the bad actors, not just like in the government, not just in America, but humanity as a whole. It emboldens everyone and anything that's evil, cruel, immoral, dishonest, ignorant, hateful. It makes people delusional. It makes people see things as black and white with no gray areas in between, with no room for compromise. And their figurehead is someone who honestly got away with mostly everything, who suffers little to no repercussions for anything that he did or anything that happened because of him. And those emboldened people, they feel like, oh, if he got away with it, if he could do that, I should be able to do too. But like I said before, the world, it doesn't work like that, or it shouldn't work like that. Because how would we get along? Is there even a social order or a social contract if everyone was individualistic, out for themselves, hedonistic, with no regard for the disenfranchised and the less fortunate? Well, anyways, we are approaching the conclusion about my take of the 2024 election. Yes, I know it was all over the place. It was unorganized. It may be a bit biased. It may be a bit uninformed. Regardless, it's my take. I have my stances about it. And I reiterate my background. I am not some kind of political expert. I didn't major in foreign policy or government or whatever, or politics. But I'm observant. I try to keep an open mind. I try to follow different sources of information. I pay attention to the world around me. I try to see what's going on, not just inside of my bubble, but outside of it too. And I am not rich. I have no ulterior motive for doing this. I'm not trying to push an agenda. I don't trying to elevate my platform or whatnot. I do this just because I could, because I had the means to, because I thought it was worth doing. Perhaps there's people out there who share similar perspectives. Perhaps people out there who don't agree with a single thing I said. But I hope this came across as civil, as organized, as worthy of discussion, worthy of discourse. And this is a questionable microphone, and there's likely a picture of an animal in the background. However, it's mine. This is the first episode. I don't know when the next episode is. I don't know how long it will be. I don't know what I'll even talk about. But if you made it to the end, thank you for listening.